Hello, boys and girls and babes. Welcome back to the Janae Talks Caps podcast. And as always, thank you all so much for joining us here today. And today, we've actually got a special trade deadline preview episode in store for you all, in which we're going to look at one move, and it was a big one that the Caps have already made, as well as taking a look at some of the speculation, some of the rumors surrounding the Caps right now leading up to Monday's trade deadline. And closer to the end of the episode, we're going to give just a few other potential moves that we feel would help the Caps as they head toward the playoffs as well. And maybe some of them are moves that no one's even thought of yet. It's not just the regurgitation of all of the same stuff that's all over all of these other sites right now is what I'm saying. So we try to think outside of the box a little bit here at Janae Talks Caps. So let's dive right into it here. First of all, like I said, the Caps have made their first trade leading up to Monday's trade deadline. And as I alluded to in our intro, it was a big one. The Caps have managed to acquire highly sought after top 4 minute munching, heavy hitting shutdown defenseman Brenden Dillon from the San Jose Sharks. And now I can't stress this enough. This is a fantastic trade for the Washington Capitals for a number of reasons, really. And we're going to talk about all of them here in just a minute. But first, let's take a look at the trade itself. So exactly what was involved in the transaction itself. The Caps obviously get Brenden Dillon, and in exchange, going back the other way, the Sharks get a second-round pick in 2020. It is not the Capitals' own second-round pick, which they dealt, but instead it's the one that they had obtained from the Colorado Avalanche as part of the Andrei Burakovsky deal. And the Sharks will also receive a conditional third-round pick in 2021. As for the conditions on that third-round pick, for right now, it's Washington's own third-rounder in 2021. But in the event that the Capitals win the Stanley Cup this season, then that pick will instead become Arizona's third rounder in this year's draft, 2020. So given that Washington is annually either at or near the top of the league standings, and thus is always picking near the very end, if not right at the very end in each of the draft rounds, while in contrast, Arizona tends to hover either somewhere near the middle or somewhere near the bottom of the standings, and thus is always picking pretty early in each of the draft rounds. It would certainly benefit the San Jose Sharks if Washington were to win the Stanley Cup again this season. So I'm sure, San Jose Sharks fans, they're not going to be in the playoffs this year. So I'm sure that they're going to be, cheering a little bit for the Capitals if it does get to that point where the Caps are in the finals. So, and of course, we as Caps fans would not complain one bit about giving up that third round pick in that event. Third round pick for the Stanley Cup, I'll take that trade all day long, all day, every day, and twice on Sundays. So San Jose as well is also retaining 50% of Dillon's cap hit and salary, which is important because it means that Washington still has more room to make another move before Monday's deadline if they so choose. And as for the player that Washington is getting with this trade, really just what an ad by Caps general manager Brian McClellan. He always seems to go above and beyond even my lofty expectations. He just makes such smart moves all across the board. He's such a big reason why this team continues to be a Stanley Cup contender every single season, even as most organizations really struggle to maintain that type of consistency during the salary cap era. And I think of, blockbuster trades like the one that brought TJ Oshie to Washington. And Osh, of course, is now an integral part of this Washington Capitals core, re-signed to an 8-year extension, and of course was an essential piece to the Caps Cup winning team in 2018. We never would have won that cup without that trade for TJ Oshie. I really stand by that statement. And McClellan was also able to get Kevin Shattenkirk at the trade deadline in 2017 when literally everyone wanted him. And even though that trade did not work out, it was an excellent trade at the time. And all of the evidence said that it should and would work out. McClellan, was being hailed as the wizard of the entire NHL when it happened. And it's not McClellan's fault that Shattenkirk decided to basically shat all over himself once he got here. No one could have foreseen that, and no one did foresee that, including all of the analysts on television. So the fact that McClellan was able to get him at a time when everybody did want him, he was the most coveted piece at that year's trade deadline. It just shows what a great general manager he is. And then, of course, the lower key moves he's made, which might fly a little bit under the radar at the time, but they're certainly not flying under the radar after we've won the Stanley Cup, such as the case when McLellan made the low-key move for Michael Kempny out of the Hawks organization prior to the 2018 trade deadline. Kempny, of course, he would play on the Capitals' top defensive pairing alongside John Carlson during the 2018 playoffs, en route to the Caps winning the Cup. It was a genius, low-cost move made for a player who had strong underlying numbers on a pretty shitty Chicago team. And Kempny, of course, he's a staple in this defensive core now, having been re-signed to a 4-year contract extension and being the steadying partner to John Carlson as Carly racks up points and goes for the Norris Trophy. And you really need that as an offensive-minded defenseman like Carlson is, because you like to jump up in the rush, and it helps your team when you jump up in the rush. It's not that Carlson is bad defensively. He's actually grown into being a very solid defensive player. It's just that when you have that partner like Kempny is to Carlson, who's so steady back there, then when you're John Carlson, you can have that confidence to jump up in the rush more because Michael Kempny's got your back. So that's been a partnership that has worked really well. Like I said, the Caps won a Cup with it, and that was just one of those, it was another one of those low-key great trades that McLellan has made recently, and another one just right along the same line as that. Another low-key trade was the one that he made for Carl Hagelin. Again, just a great acquisition leading up to last year's trade deadline. And Hagelin, again, he maybe hadn't posted the most impressive goal and assist totals playing on a shitty Los Angeles Kings team, but his underlying numbers were very strong, and McLellan saw what he could be for the Caps. So McLellan, by the way, he's been right, as Hagelin instantly became a crucial part of the Caps' defensive game, both at even strength and on the penalty kill. The Caps' penalty kill, of course, is first in the entire NHL when Hagelin is in the lineup, and recently we've been seeing what second half Carl Hagelin can do offensively as well, and that's sort of been the routine for him throughout his career. He doesn't produce much in the first half of the season, but when the intensity ramps up during the second half and the playoffs, that's when he plays his best hockey. So that's what we're seeing now, and he's been at almost a point per game playing on the third line over the last dozen games or so here. So my point is, our general manager has been and is a complete wizard, whether it's been with his low-key moves or the bigger splashes that he's made, such as the one made this week to get Brenden Dillon. And getting back to Dillon specifically, for Caps fans who maybe don't get to watch a lot of the West Coast games because, you're in a different time zone, 3 hours ahead, and the Sharks games, I know, for example, they're usually starting at 10 o'clock or even 10:30 p.m. Eastern time. Well, I live in Vancouver, British Columbia, as most of you probably already know, and so I'm here to tell you, if as a Caps fan you haven't seen a lot of Sharks games, I'm here to tell you that you should be very, very excited about your Caps adding this player. For those who, like I said, haven't got to see him a lot, Brenden Dillon, he's a huge 6'4", 225-pound behemoth of a shutdown defenseman. He's a minute muncher who is very responsible defensively. He was playing on San Jose's top pairing alongside of Norris Trophy winner Brent Burns, which is obviously, very convenient for us, since here in Washington, Dillon will likely again be playing the left side alongside of a right-handed shooting Norris Trophy winning defenseman in John Carlson. I guess I should technically say future Norris Trophy winner John Carlson, but come on, let's be honest. Even if he were to get injured today and not play another game this season, he would still probably win it. He's been that good and that head and shoulders above the rest of the pack. So Dillon, he's very used to playing a lot of minutes, and he's very used to lining up against the opposition's top offensive players as well. And he's done very well in that role, even on a shitty San Jose team. For example, here's some stats for you because you all know I love my stats. So Dillon playing on San Jose's top pairing and lining up against the opposition's top offensive players has somehow managed to have an even plus-minus rating this season on a Sharks team that is negative 39 as a whole. Honestly, how he's managed to have an even rating on that team, and especially in the role that he played for them, I will never know. It is very impressive. He was first on the Sharks in hits this season among all Sharks players, which really is not surprising because he's actually second in the entire NHL amongst defensemen for hits this season. He definitely likes to throw his body around. He's a big, heavy, strong guy who plays a very physical brand of hockey. So he'll fit right in Washington, as that's exactly the game that the Caps like to play, especially in the playoffs. He was second among all Sharks defensemen in shot attempt percentage this season with a 51.7% advantage at even strength. So again, how he managed to have a positive shot attempt percentage on a team that is routinely obliterated at even strength, especially while he plays against the opposition's top players every game, is truly beyond me. This guy must be good. It's also probably helped by the fact that he makes a great first pass out of his own zone. So that always helps your team's possession numbers and overall game, obviously, when you can exit your own zone quickly and effectively as soon as you've got the puck back. And that's another thing that Brenden Dillon is very good at, by the way, is getting the puck back. He's very good at separating opposition players from the puck, breaking up cycles, etc. Seriously, just watch him when he plays. You'll see him disrupt the cycle, get the puck back for us, and then make a crisp, clean breakout pass to get us out of our zone, all in a matter of seconds. So he's very effective, very responsible with the puck, doesn't fuck around, and doesn't make mistakes. So those are all things that we've needed more of recently in our own end, as I'm sure we all have noticed. And getting back to the stats, he was also third on the entire Sharks team, that's amongst defensemen and forwards, in on-ice goals for at even strength. So Are you sensing a little bit of a theme here with all of these stats? Here's a guy who plays a shutdown role. He's skating against the opposition's top players every game, and yet he manages to make a positive impact even while playing on a truly terrible team. Any stat that you look at, he's in the positive, and he's got some of the best possession metrics on the team, even while, like I said, playing that shutdown role against the opposition's top players every game. So his team is much better with him on the ice than they are without him. Much, much better. And his Sharks team, who sucks as a whole, was routinely getting the better of the play whenever he was on the ice for them. So, that's really saying something for Dillon and for the impact that he's able to make on a team. So when you look at the underlying numbers, the advanced stats, this looks like a very, very good trade for the Caps in their push for the Stanley Cup. And you know what? When you look at it using the good old-fashioned eyeball test, it looks damn good as well. Dillon, he's huge, he's strong, he's physical as all hell, whether it's the bone-crunching open ice hits that he lays, or his play in the corners, or his play in front of the net. He plays hard, and he plays mean. Tom Wilson, notorious tough guy, obviously, he actually labeled Dillon as one of the only guys in the league whose corner you never wanted to go into to fight for a puck, because you knew it was always going to be an all-out battle and it was going to hurt. So that's exactly what the Caps needed to add on their back end, and to their top four as well. And when you look at the heat maps for the San Jose Sharks, it is truly insane, the absolutely staggering difference that they see, or that they were seeing, in front of their own net when Dillon is on the ice versus when he is off of it. It's staggering. The opposition was getting practically zero looks at the Sharks' net this season whenever Dillon was on the ice. And in contrast, whenever he was not on the ice for them, it was like a goddamn feeding frenzy in front of their own net. So he was the only guy on that team who could keep guys and pucks away from his own net. And do you know what exactly the Caps have had a lot of trouble doing recently? Keeping guys and pucks away from their own net. So especially in those high danger areas, which the stats say Dillon is very, very good at protecting. So he's basically exactly what the doctor ordered for the Caps. And as a bonus, he's also a veteran player with a ton of playoff experience, having been on deep runs already with the San Jose Sharks in recent years. He's played 60 playoff games since 2015, which is tied for the most on San Jose. And as yet another added bonus, he's also bound to have a hate on already for the Pittsburgh Penguins, as the Sharks, of course, faced them in the Stanley Cup Final in 2016. So you can never go wrong with a guy who holds a grudge against Pittsburgh. You can never go wrong with somebody who hates Pittsburgh. So it also seems to be that anyone who knows Brenden Dillon as a teammate and or as a person has nothing but sparkling things to say about him as a person. So everyone says he's the best teammate that you could ask for, the best locker room guy that you could ask for. But that's sort of to be expected at this point for the Caps when they're making a trade. As ever since Brian McClellan became the GM, he doesn't seem to add anyone to this very tight-knit group unless they pass, the good human being and good teammate test. So I think Brian McClellan, he makes a habit out of asking for a lot of referrals on a guy before pulling the trigger on a trade, or on a signing for that matter, which is a very good thing. So it's working really well for this group. And as for where Dillon will fit in this lineup, my initial thought was you put him right onto the top pairing with John Carlson. And obviously, it appears that head coach Todd Reardon agrees. He's thinking the same thing, as that's where Dillon has started. For me, you go with the top pairing of Dillon and Carlson, and then your second pairing moving forward is Michael Kempny with Dmitry Orlov on the right side. People tend to forget that Orlov, earlier in his career, he actually played a lot of hockey on the right side of the ice, and he actually did very well there. So I think that's a great option and gives you a very formidable top four, one of the best in the playoff picture for sure. And then I would have Jonas Siegenthaler with Radko Gudas on the third pairing, just as it's been, pretty much all season long here. They've been very steady. Siegenthaler is a huge part of a very successful penalty killing unit, and Gudas obviously is a huge physical presence back there, plays very solid defense and makes a great breakout pass. So I think top to bottom, that's now one of the best groups of 6 defensemen in the league. And it goes without saying, but I would, those who know me, that's why I say it goes without saying, but I would have Nick Jensen eating nachos in the press box for sure. This guy, he's proven himself just beyond useless at this point. And that kind of brings me into my next segment of this episode, as there's a lot of other speculation going on surrounding the Washington Capitals right now. It's very possible that Brian McClellan is not yet done after having already traded for Brenden Dillon. For one of the biggest reports coming from a very reputable source, probably the most reputable source, in Bob McKenzie, aka the Bob father of all things insider knowledge when it comes to hockey. One of his reports that just recently came out was that the Caps are one of 4 teams left who are seriously talking to the Rangers about acquiring forward Chris Kreider. There were previously 5 teams who were in on Kreider, but McKenzie reports that when the St. Louis Blues traded for Marco Scandella, that basically dropped them out of the running. So the 4 teams who are left are your Washington Capitals, the Colorado Avalanche, the Boston Bruins, and funny enough, the Rangers' biggest rival, the New York Islanders. Bob McKenzie did add a little bit of an asterisk in saying that in the case of the New York Islanders, the package going back the Rangers' way would have to be just astronomically ridiculous in order for the Rangers to choose the Islanders as a landing spot for Kreider. So given the sheer premium that the Islanders would have to pay, that pretty much automatically gives the other 3 teams in the running, the Caps, the Avalanche, and the Bruins, a serious upper hand over the Isles. But it's still bound to be a bidding war, whether it's 3 or 4 teams who are seriously being considered. So McKenzie reports that currently the asking price for Kreider is a package consisting of at least a first-round pick, a good prospect, and at least one of a roster player, a lesser prospect, or an additional pick. So, for argument's sake, let's assume that the Rangers won't trade Kreider to the Islanders. That leaves the Caps, the Avs, and the Bruins. Obviously, when you look at the rosters for those 3 teams, the Bruins need a forward a lot more than the Caps or the Avs do. In fact, the Bruins probably need to add multiple forwards, not just one, if they want to come out of a deep Eastern Conference. The Caps have the deepest forward group of the 3 teams, and if the Caps were to land Kreider, he would likely be playing on their third line, unless, of course, there were an injury. But for the Bruins or the Avs, he would be in their top 6. So you could say the need for the Bruins and the Avs here is a lot greater than it is for the Caps. And I'd say the need is greatest for the Bruins for sure. Not only because of their roster makeup, but also because they're playing in the Eastern Conference, which is a lot tougher than the Western Conference that the Avs are playing in. The Avs can get by in the West without adding Kreider or a similar player. For the Bruins, I'm not so sure. When you look at Washington, Pittsburgh, and Tampa Bay, and you compare their forward groups to that of the Bruins, it's going to be tough mudding for the Bruins in the Eastern playoff picture. Not impossible, but tough. For example, let's take just a quick look at Boston's second line compared to Washington's second line. So, like I said, if the Bruins were to land Kreider, it would definitely be to put him straight onto their second line, which is definitely lacking as it's currently constructed. And this is why the Bruins need a guy like Kreider. In fact, they probably need 2 or 3 Chris Kreiders, because when you look at the Bruins second line, so Chris Kreider right now, he has 24 goals and 45 points already this season. He is outscoring every player that currently makes up the Bruins second line, and it's not close. The Bruins second line currently is Jake DeBrusk, David Krejci, and Danton Heinen. Between the 3 of them total for the season, they have combined for 38 goals. Yes, you're hearing me right, 38 goals. That is the total for the whole season between 3 guys. So that is obviously not the type of production that you want from your second line if you were serious about winning the Stanley Cup. The Capitals' second line of Jakub Vrana, Evgeny Kuznetsov, and TJ Oshie, by contrast, has combined for 66 goals already this season. And they've done that in fewer games than the Bruins trio has played. So they're almost doubling up what the Bruins' second line is doing. Lars Eller, the Capitals' third-line center, has outscored 2/3 of the Bruins' second line this season, and he plays a lot fewer minutes than those guys too. So that's exactly why the Bruins need to acquire a legitimate top 6 forward like Chris Kreider. And in fact, if you ask me, like I said, I think they probably need 2 or 3 top 6 forwards. They only have 3 legitimate top 6 forwards as it is at the moment, and that's obviously their top line. But as we know, and as we've seen so many times now, those are the types of things that make the difference in a 7-game playoff series when the top lines cancel one another out. You need scoring depth to be able to win 4 rounds in the playoffs. Not 3, 4. And so you can understand why Bruins fans are starting to freak out a little bit over Sweeney not having done anything to improve the team as of yet. While Washington has added Dillon, Pittsburgh has added Zucker, and Tampa Bay has added Coleman. So, for what it's worth, the Bruins were reported to have tried to land 2 of those 3 players, first Blake Coleman and then Brenden Dillon, and Sweeney obviously failed on both, as they both went to rival teams. So I definitely understand Bruins fans being on edge right now. Sweeney does need to respond because so far, a super tough Eastern Conference has only gotten even tougher over these last couple of weeks. So I do think the Bruins will be the most desperate of the 3 teams to land Kreider. That's pretty much why I'm talking about this, because it's relevant to the Caps as far as, trade deadline plans. So there is a point at which that I would say the Caps should walk away from it if the price gets too ridiculous. He is an unrestricted free agent at season's end after all. So he's likely a rental. So you don't want to go too overboard with what you're paying to get him when in all likelihood you're only going to have him for a few months. So for me, I would give up the first round pick, no problem. But when it comes to prospects, that's where things get a little bit trickier. The Caps, for their part, they have a very good, deep prospect pool, and they have a number of guys who look like they're going to be very good NHL players. Any of those guys could be of severe interest to the Rangers, and the Caps and the Avs both certainly have more and better quality options to choose from when it comes to prospects compared to what the Bruins have in their system. So I think prospect-wise, the Caps and the Avs will certainly be more intriguing to the Rangers. For me, though, given that Kreider is likely going to be just a rental, you do have to draw the line somewhere. And for me, for the Caps, that line would be with 4 prospects in particular who I consider to be their untouchables, because they look like they're going to be stars at the NHL level and a big part of the Caps' future. And those four would be defenseman Alex Alexeyev and Martin Fehérváry, and then centers Connor McMichael and Alexei Protas. All four of them look as if they could play prominent roles for the Caps for years to come, with Alexeyev and Fehérváry being touted as the future of the Capitals' top four defensive group, and McMichael and Protas looking like surefire top 9 forwards in the NHL. With McMichael in particular looking like a surefire top 6 NHL center, as he's led the OHL in scoring for much of this season, and just recently won a gold medal with Team Canada at the World Junior Championship as well, and he played a huge role in Canada winning that gold medal. Protas as well, he's led the WHL in scoring for much of this season, and not to mention the fact that he's a total beast already at 6'6" and already 210 pounds. So exactly the type of prospect that you want to hang on to. So those are the 4 untouchables as far as I'm concerned. But anyone else in the prospect pool, I would say, is fair game. And the Caps, as I've said, they have a lot for the Rangers to choose from. So for Brian McClellan, it's kind of that balancing act between the present and the future, as you obviously want to try and win another cup during the Ovechkin-Backstrom era. But at the same time, you don't want to totally sell the farm in order to do it, because even if you do sell the farm, a Stanley Cup is never guaranteed. If it were, the choice would be easy. But, shit happens in the playoffs, man. Like, you don't have to look much further back than just last season to find a perfect example of that, as a historically dominant in the regular season Tampa Bay Lightning squad was swept out of the first round by what was, on paper anyways, a seriously inferior Columbus Blue Jackets club. So the President's Trophy counts for shit in the playoffs, and a lot of the time shit happens before the playoffs even begin as well, with injuries and whatnot. So if you have a couple of poorly timed injuries to key players right before the playoffs start, then guess what? You just sold the farm for nothing. So you do have to be careful, but at the same time, you have to balance that being careful with a certain amount of balls as well if you want to get anywhere good in the spring too. So it's a delicate balancing act, and one that I think Caps general manager Brian McClellan has pretty much perfected. The Caps are well set up for the future prospect-wise, as they've managed to somehow avoid trading away any good ones really since since George McPhee was the general manager here. And I don't think I need to remind anyone who he traded away to Nashville for an aging Martin Erat. But in the Brian McClellan era, the Caps have impressively managed to hang on to their grade A prospects while still managing to win the Stanley Cup at the same time. So they are well set up for the future, and they have good young players on their roster now as well, that next generation, if you will. So what will be the post-Ovechkin, post-Backstrom, post-Oshie era in DC, and that's, of course, the Evgeny Kuznetsovs, the Jakub Vranas, the Tom Wilsons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think we're going to see a full rebuild even when Alex Ovechkin and Nicklas Backstrom eventually do retire, because the Caps have done a remarkable job of keeping talented young players rolling in and locking them up to extensions. And as I mentioned, they've stocked the cupboard well down in the minors and in the juniors and at the college level as well. It's full of exciting young prospects whose rights they own. So really they're in great shape. And because they are in great shape, they can afford to trade away a few prospects and draft picks in order to get what they want at the trade deadline and go on another cup run. So the reason why you would want to add Chris Kreider is pretty obvious. For the Caps, like I said, he'd slot in on your third line. He's obviously big, he's fast, he can score, he plays hard, he would fit right in here in Washington. And for the Caps, I think that's probably the biggest thing that you're looking at doing when it comes to the forward group. The top 6 obviously is very much set already. You have the best fourth line in the league. If there's somewhere up front that you can add to, it'd be giving Lars Eller a scoring winger. So there are some just having a look here, pulling it up again. There are some other things circulating around the rumor mill right now involving the Capitals, including a couple of potential moves on defense. In particular, one rumored subtraction and another rumored addition. So Elliot Friedman, on his 31 Thoughts podcast, which if you haven't heard it, you should definitely subscribe to it. He mentioned that the Caps are interested in trading Nick Jensen season. I can't tell you how for this I am, really. Literally, I can't possibly overstate it. I am so for making this happen. It'd be addition by subtraction just to get him out of the lineup. And the added bonus that you recoup the salary cap space if you are able to trade him. It's muy bueno, he's been terrible this season, basically a giveaway machine out there. He reminds me of one of those cannons that they use to, fire t-shirts into the crowd during intermission, except that he's firing turnovers for the opposition to gobble up and score on us. He's just been awful. And he's got a cap hit that's kind of in the middle where he'd be a very cost-effective option if he's playing in the top four of your defense. But the problem obviously being that I think we all know that we don't want him playing in the top four of our defense. So he's not a top four caliber defenseman. He's shown us that. He's proved it over and over and over again. And to be clear, I do think he's fine in a limited role on your bottom pairing. But that's he's fine if he's playing on the bottom pairing and he's playing very sheltered minutes and getting the easy assignments. But the problem is that if that's all he's going to be, then he's too expensive on his current contract. So that money can be better spent. So basically what I'm saying is hell yes to trading him. He's expendable now for sure after the trade for Brenden Dillon. There's just absolutely no way he should be playing in your top four now, with those spots surely occupied by John Carlson, Brenden Dillon, Dmitry Orlov, and Michael Kempny. That is a very strong top four, and Radko Gudas and Jonas Siegenthaler are both much better options than Jensen for the bottom pairing. Gudas, obviously, we've talked about it. He brings a huge physical element that Jensen does not, and likewise, Gudas makes smart, clean breakout passes, something Jensen does not do. Or at least if he does, he hasn't shown it to us. Gudas makes quick decisions with the puck. He's effective. Again, these are just all things that Jensen just is not or does not do. So Siegenthaler as well, although just 22 years old, he's shown a lot more composure and poise under pressure than Nick Jensen has. Siegs, he's cool as a fucking cucumber, man. He's a huge asset on the penalty kill as well. The Caps penalty kill is top 5 in the entire NHL and has been for most of the season. And Siegenthaler obviously is a huge part of that. He starts almost every single penalty kill. So that alone is enough to have him in the lineup over Nick Jensen. The Caps have a ton of depth on the back end after the trade for Dillon. So Jensen, he's become expendable. So I say go for it. Get a draft pick, get some cap space. Most importantly, it would be a good move in the present and for the future for the next few years coming up. So the other idea that Elliot Friedman floated in his podcast was that apparently, and this is not me making this up, apparently the Caps have legitimate interest in bringing Mike Green back to DC. So I know a lot of Caps fans have a lot of feelings regarding Mike Green. It's a love-hate thing for some people. But for me, I have to say I think it's a great idea. Just for the power play alone, it's a great idea. And for those who, maybe haven't really watched him much since he went to Detroit, maybe passing a little bit of judgment without having watched him recently, we're all guilty of doing that from time to time. He has actually improved a ton defensively over these last few years. He is still injury prone. I would say that would be the one downside. But really it's not that big of a downside because like I said, we have a ton of depth on the back end. And so even if Greeny were to be hit with an injury, we still have 6 other totally capable starters on defense. 7 if you count Martin Ferravari, which I do. And 8 if you count Christian Juice, which I do. Juice obviously already played a top 6 role on defense through 1 Stanley Cup championship run for this team. So he can do it again if need be. And with Mike Green, we all know the upside. The power play, as I mentioned, would instantly be taken to a whole new level. Of all of the guys who we've seen quarterback the power play over the years and feeding Alex Ovechkin for his patented one-timers, none hold a candle to Mike Green in that situation. Even the Green haters have to admit that, right? Number 52 to number 8 to the back of the net on the power play was as automatic as an automatic transmission. Greeny and Ovi always had a special chemistry that resulted in a lot of Capitals goals. Add that into the fact that, recently this season on the power play, no one can seem to get the puck into Ovechkin's wheelhouse. It's like nobody can feed him with a proper pass, it seems, right now. And obviously, Mike Green starts looking pretty good. So the other thing Mike Green is very good at is breaking the puck out of his own zone quickly and effectively. He makes a fantastic first pass, and the Caps were always out of their own zone quickly because of it. So for me, the pros that would come with a deal for Mike Green far outweigh any perceived cons. So I'm all for it. And also, nostalgia. Like, we could all break out our Greeny jerseys again. There's a few other trade options for the Caps that I've certainly thought would be good options, including one who's unfortunately already been removed from the trade market, and that was defenseman Dylan DeMello, who's already been traded by the Ottawa Senators to the Winnipeg Jets. It's a great ad for the Jets. He's a very solid right-handed defenseman on a cheap contract, with his cap hit being just $900,000 this season. He will be an unrestricted free agent at season's end, and he was relatively cheap to acquire as well, as the Jets sent just a third-round pick in this year's draft back to the Senators. That's it. So great deal for the Jets in their push to make the playoffs in a wide-open Western Conference where it looks like literally pretty much anyone could come out of the West. There's a lot going on over there. So the other guy that I've had my eye on for the Caps is defenseman Matt Waugh from the Los Angeles Kings. If you don't know who Waugh is or haven't seen him play, he's still pretty young. He's 24 years old. He's a right shot, which is where the Caps would be looking to add after, already acquiring the left-handed Brenden Dillon. And he's put up really fantastic puck possession numbers while playing over 17 minutes a game on a shitty Los Angeles Kings team. So his Corsi for percentage is 55.9, and his Fenwick for percentage is 56.5. So that's just ridiculous. Obviously, it's helped a little bit because he does get some starts in the offensive zone, but, that's not the whole reason. It's not all because of that. All of his numbers, possession-wise, very strong. So, and again, that's playing on a pretty weak team. So his team as well, similar to Brenden Dillon with the San Jose Sharks, Matt Waugh's team, Los Angeles Kings, they're much better when he's on the ice versus when he is not on the ice. So he's got a cheap cap hit of $700,000 this season, and there's the added benefit that he'll be a restricted free agent at season's end, so you maintain control over the asset even after this season. And that's what I've been looking at as far as the trade market. But I think, I don't think the Caps are done. I don't think McLellan's done. I think he's got something else up his sleeve. Generally, he's pretty tight-lipped. Like, he's kind of one of those general managers that if he says something, he's saying what he means. He doesn't really beat around the bush too much. And you tend to not really know exactly, who's coming on board until he does it, right? Like, there's nothing really ever leaked with McLellan. So, but he did say in his media availability the other day that he is still looking to improve the team. So I don't think he's done. I don't think he's going to do anything crazy or wild or stupid because that's not his style. But I think if there's something that can improve the team and he's not, selling the farm to do it, I think that's going to be something that he's going to be looking at and probably getting done before the deadline here on Monday. So it's time to wrap up our episode for today anyway. We've been talking for a while now. It's easy to get carried away yapping on and on when you're talking trade deadline, isn't it? It's one of the best, most exciting days of the year for hockey fans. And I personally cannot wait to see what goes down. It's always a shit show. Just a total gong show every year. So anyways, that's all for now, Caps fans. As always, thank you all so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you have not done so already. We are on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify as well, on iHeartRadio, on Google Podcasts, on Stitcher, on TuneIn, on Podcast Addict now. So pretty much anywhere and everywhere that you get your podcast from, we are there. So subscribe, leave us a review if you like what you hear. We really appreciate it, and I always love reading the reviews. And until next time, Caps fans, you stay classy, and we will talk to you all after the trade deadline. Let's go, Caps!